Hey folks, it's Memorial Day 2011. Our last lesson was February 1st, 2011, so lesson of the week has become lesson of the quarter. But I've got a holiday, so it's a perfect opportunity to sit down and to answer some questions that I've received. A lot of them have been about that creating chords video, which is the last lesson that we worked on. So some of you want to dive into the more theoretical approach to building chords, so that when you build these chords and you created something new, you want to be able to know what to name it, you want to be able to write it down, and also you want to be able to identify chords whenever you see a chord written down that you're not familiar with, something like C major 7 flat 5 add 13. You want to be able to know how to make that chord, and you can do it without the use of a chord book if you know your major scale. So this lesson is going to assume that you know the major scale. If you don't, this is not going to make any sense to you. So go learn the major scale and then come back and watch this for some great chords. Okay, so I did a lesson a while back called Niner, and that talked about all the different 9 chords that you can make. The bigger your chord vocabulary is, the higher the ceiling. Higher the creative ceiling for writing songs and for just making really cool sounds, whereas if you use simple chords all the time, they're only going to take you so far in terms of sound. Whenever you take a chord and you alter it, like we talked about last time, a chord that you already know and you just alter it a bit, you can come up with some really cool stuff. And these chords have specific sounds that you can only get by making this type of chord. So, if you see something like F sharp dominant 11, you need to know how to play that chord and not take the shortcut and just play something like F sharp, because is a lot different than, but just some minor changes. But it's that chord is usually going to be very critical to the sound of the entire song. So let's talk about some of these. What I did several years ago is and you can do this, it's very easy, this wonderful thing called the internet that I believe some guy named Al Gore invented. And you can go on this internet and you can type into this little site called Google chord formulas, and you can find some really great stuff there. So that's what I did, is I just Googled chord formulas and I came across a list of formulas. And what a chord formula is it'll say, okay, the formula for the major chord is 1, 3, 5. Those numbers come from the scale, the first, third, and fifth notes of the scale, for whatever chord you're wanting to make. So if you're wanting to make a G major chord, it's 1, 3, 5, G, B, D. Those are the first, third, and fifth notes of the scale. When you're building a chord, it's typically built in thirds. A lot of chords are. Most chords are. So especially in Western music, 1, 3, 5, 7. That would be the next number in the sequence, 7. So then you have major 7. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. That's the next number in the sequence. You'd have a major 9. And so I won't talk about nines because we already did an entire lesson on that. So, and all you do is, for something like, the next one would be 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11. You would find the 11th note in the scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and identify that note. That's a C. Okay, technically it's a B flat because I'm tuned down a whole step, but, it's semantics. Let's just pretend that this is in standard tuning. So in order to make the major 11, you'd have to have the first, third, fifth, 7th, 9th, and 11th notes. Okay, that's a lot of notes. So sometimes, these come from like piano. The chord formulas that I looked at were, for piano. And when you translate over to guitar, you can't play as many notes on a guitar as you can on a piano. So you have to omit certain notes, and in order to make it work under your fingers. So for example, let's take a look at the major 11. All right, so this is a chord that I haven't used actually before in a musical situation. This one specifically, the G major 11. I've used major 11s in other ones, but not G. So here's my approach to it. So I'm going to find the G. I'm going to try to keep as many notes from the original chord formula as possible before omitting. So want to keep the G, so you know what chord it is. You want to keep the 1. Obviously, we're going to need the 11 for it to be an 11. And for it to be major, we have to have some sort of indication that the chord is major. And usually the notes that make the chord major, it's either going to be the 3. If it's a 3, it's major. If it's a flat third, it's minor. Or the 7 can indicate whether or not a chord is major or minor. Major 7, and then the flat 7 is known as a minor 7. So, lost yet? I kind of am. Now here's, all right, so G, the 11, like we talked about, it's the same thing as a 4. It'd be C. So we have to have the C, and we also would like to have the B in there because that'd sound nice. And then to make it major 11, we're going to need either the 9 or like the major 7. And typically I think you want to keep the major 7 in there. That's what's going to make this major 11 as opposed to add 11. We'll talk about that in a second. So there's a G major 11. 1, there's the 5, there's the 4 or the 11. Then there's the 3rd, and then there's the major 7. Now the reason you call this an 11 and not a 4 is because a 4 is in the chord formula for the suspended 4th chord, which is a 1, 4, 5, as opposed to 1, 3, 5. It'd be 1, 4, 5. But since we have 3 in there with it, we have the B and the C. That's the chord formula for 11. So, hey, I didn't invent the formulas, so don't get mad at me. But you get this cool little sound whenever you have chords that are really close together in pitch, either in minor second intervals or major second intervals. You get this kind of dissonance because they're very close together in pitch and they're kind of fighting for space in your ear. So you get this that kind of vibrating sound. Dissonance is what that's called, and that's called a chord cluster. So that's kind of cool. So yeah, that. Now the add 11 as opposed to major 11 is just you've taken the major chord formula, which is 1, 3, 5, and then you just added an 11 onto the end of it. So that chord would look something like this. Okay, there's the 1, 4, 5. So that's the suspended chord. But we have to kind of alter some things. So we need to take that 1, and then there's the 3. So here's the major chord, 1, 5, and 3. And then we just added that C in there. There you go. It's kind of a stretchy chord, but definitely worth it. It's a really cool sound. And the same rules apply if you're wanting to learn a 13. If you want to figure out a 13. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13. 7 notes. That's impossible to play on a guitar. You can't play 7 notes on a guitar at one time. Well, unless you're doing a two-handed kind of thing, which is always really fun to do. But if you're wanting to just use one hand, you gotta, again, find the notes that are okay to omit. Obviously, to make this a 13, you have to have the 13. So you gotta have the 1. That's kind of key to the chord, and you gotta have the 13 in there somewhere. To make it 13, then you have to have some indication that it's major. So you gotta have either the 3rd or the 7. In this case, you actually need the 7 for it to be a 13. And you can find online acceptable, you can take these piano chords and they have translations into guitar chords. So it'll show you what notes are okay to omit and what notes are not okay to omit. So for a G major 13, you have to have a 1, you got to have the 9, you have to have the major 7, and then you have to have, obviously, the 13, which in this case is an E. 13 is just an octave higher than a 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is an E. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. That's an E. It's just a higher E. So you can think of this as a major 9, which we talked about in the 9er video. Major 9, but with the E involved. That's pretty. Okay, and the one for all you maniacs out there, when you come across a chord like C major 7, flat 5, add 13, like I mentioned earlier, to be able to figure out a chord like that, and you don't have a chord book handy, is you just use your knowledge of the major scale and break it down and put all those notes together to make the chord. So C major 7, and then in parentheses will be flat 5, and then add 13. Okay, so C major 7, but let's take that part of the chord equation. So C major 7 is that 1, 3, 5, 7, or C, E, G, B. But the G, since it's the 5, it has to be a flat 5. So we have to make G, G flat. So now we have to have C, G flat. Sorry about that, it was kind of loud. And then major 7, and then the third. So you get this. In the 13, remember we talked about it's just an octave higher than a 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So then you get this chord. Very simple to make. I mean, it only involves fretting 3 notes. So a chord that looks complicated on paper, a lot of times it's not going to be that complicated to make. But sometimes it is. So that's how you figure that out. Obviously, you have to know the major scale very well and know all the names of the notes on the neck. So all that stuff is, basic. That's Guitar 101. But then, you have to figure out these very strange chords. That's all you got to do. Just put the pieces together. All right, I hope that helped. If you were completely lost, that probably means you don't know the major scale all that well. So take it upon yourself to learn the major scale, and use the wonders of the internet and great books to figure out more on chord theory. But hopefully that's something good to get you started on some of these really nice sounding chords.